Consortium for Resilient Gulf Communities has the overall goal of assessing and addressing the human dimensions of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Our synthesis project is focusing in particular on how we build resilience in communities to disasters like the oil spill in the Gulf region. It's important because we need to understand better what the human impacts are in terms of public health, behavioral health, economics and social well-being among communities. We also need to identify where there are still gaps in our understanding. And this is all important because we need to provide some recommendations to government agencies, non-government organizations, industry, other stakeholders about how we can better prepare communities to be more resilient in advance of another major disaster like that. Yeah, we have a very interdisciplinary team working with a range of qualitative and quantitative methods. So we have a lot of different interesting findings. Some of the highlights thus far are firstly that increased exposure to impacts of the oil spill is related to screening positive for depression and anxiety. And 6 years after the oil spill, we're still finding that people are very concerned. They have ongoing worry about the ongoing impacts on their personal health, on their household finances, and also on their community well-being. We have found that not all types of social capital are supportive of resilience. So sometimes it's good to be involved in a lot of different local organizations to find support in times of need. But other times it doesn't matter how big your social support network is, it's more the type of resources that's important to find. And then economically speaking, some of our analyses have shown short-run negative impacts on fisheries landings right after the 2010 oil spill, in part because of the closures of the fisheries. And also some of our analyses of tourism impacts have shown short-run negative impacts on wages and also number of employees in tourism-related industries. There's a lot of implications of our research for the Gulf region. I think one is that we have to be sensitive to the variation across communities in terms of how they're impacted and also the capacity that they have to respond and recover to different disasters. That tells us a lot about what different communities or parts of communities will need. Perhaps it's different communication strategies, different types of resources. Perhaps some have different mental and behavioral health needs. Others have more economic focused needs. So in being more sensitive to variation across communities, we can be more adaptive as we receive information and understand a situation more fully. Perhaps we can better understand or have a more nuanced idea of the strengths and weaknesses of any particular community and then tailor our strategies both in response to a disaster but also in anticipation of another event occurring and thinking about how we can best build resilience in communities that suits their strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, I think we're learning a lot that is going to be relevant in the future. One thing to keep in mind is that we're living in a time of change, whether it's environmental change, population distribution is changing, technology is changing, land use is changing. And so what that means is we need more adaptive resilience building efforts. And this applies at many levels. I think if you're talking about federal, state, local government strategies or policies, in anticipation of preparing for a disaster or responding to a disaster, they need to be more adaptive. But similarly, community-based organizations who are right there living and working with communities on a daily basis before and after a disaster event, they can take their more nuanced approach and be adaptive as they receive feedback and understand what was the event, what are the likely impacts, but what are the actual impacts as the event unfolds, and what does that mean for how we can best support communities as they respond and then have a longer term recovery. Yeah, one thing that I think is going to become increasingly relevant and forefront in people's minds is what is the evidence base that this fantastic effort has had an impact? And have we got the data available to evaluate the efforts and understand the relationship between what we've done as scientists and as communities together in understanding the Deepwater Horizon oil spill? And what can we tell policymakers who have resources in the future about the strengths and the weaknesses of this interdisciplinary approach? So I think evaluation is going to become very important in the next couple of years.